Great. So good afternoon. Welcome to 25 Minutes with Cap. Each month we discuss recent trends in the specialty insurance space. Today I'm excited to have Garrett Koehn joining us. He's the Chief Innovation Officer at CRC. As we go on from here, if you have questions for the session, feel free to enter them into the chat. We'll do our best to answer them. Just a reminder, the content of the webinar is the property of CapSpecialty and is for informational purposes only. You're not permitted to republish, share, or quote from this webinar without the prior written consent of CapSpecialty, which can be obtained by contacting marketing@capspecialty.com. Garrett, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, hey, we've been starting most of these with the question of how'd you get into the insurance business?
Oh, it had been a childhood dream to move into insurance. No, I forget, and I've thought about this a lot because I'm involved. I oversee our diversity and inclusion stuff. Like how do people get into our business? And
right.
There's to me, I think there's three main buckets. They're you went to school for it. There's that bucket of those people that thought that was a good idea. Then there's the friend and family bucket of which one of us is from. And
Yep.
then there's the accident bucket. We stumbled into it. And I feel that this is anecdotally, I feel like it's almost a third from each, but I'm in the last bucket. It was just, I got offered 28 grand a year by Marsh, and that would just seem like a ton of money at that time.
Yeah.
And so I had moved to San Francisco. Back then there wasn't internet job searches, so you would buy a book, mail out your resume to all these spots. Wasn't looking for insurance, wound up in some meetings with Marsh, and they hired me initially to work on a mortgage-backed securities program, which is sort of interesting. So we were placing special hazard insurance, like earthquake insurance, on portfolios of mortgages before the Northridge earthquake, which killed it, and also before the crash in that
How'd you move from there? How'd you move from there to Tri-City, San Francisco, tech E&O, a lot of public D&O?
Yeah. So I was a Marsh for not that long. It was great. There were some other good friends that I still have from those couple of years. But then I went to Carpenter Moore, a smaller retailer and wholesaler at that time, and then wound up getting recruited to a company called Tri-City, which used to be a top 5 wholesaler. I became a partner there. And then kind of started this progress of private equity backed flips of wholesalers. So I was at Tri-City. Then we sold that to a company called Bisis. Bisis got sold to C-Bank. We spun insurance back out with Bisis Life, which is now called Crump Life. John Howard was at the helm of that, who's now the head of TIH, the holding company that we're part of. But a group of us spun that out, and we sold to a company called JC Flowers. JC Flowers had bought Crump from Marsh. We effectively took over Crump, and then wound up selling that to Truist, to BB&T, who already owned CRC, and then our management group got pretty heavily involved with CRC at that point. And Dave Obenauer had come in at the Crump transaction. He's the CEO of CRC Group, and John Howard's now running the insurance company, or running the holding company. Excuse me.
All right, so you're now the Chief Innovation Officer.
Yeah.
Tell us what that is.
Well, I've got a couple of functions. I've been president of Brokerage for the last several years, and then I'm still president of our executive lines division. So I haven't abandoned all operational stuff. But yeah, so the Chief Innovation Officer it's a new role for us. And obviously technology has become really important for our industry as a whole. And so some of it I'm sort of making up as we go through it, but it's stuff that I had been doing anyways. As you know, I've been heavily involved in the startup ecosystem for a long time, but in CRC and outside of it, I'm involved with a few different venture funds. And so a lot of it relates to, and our chief digital officer is also here in San Francisco with me, and she's the one who decides like who our vendors are and who we need from a technology standpoint. And so I'd say a lot of my time is spent in that regard on finding the startup companies that might be of interest to us for us to do proof of concepts with, or for us to work with, making introductions with them across our different companies, because most of the people on this call might know us obviously for like the property casualty side, but then we also have Benefit Mall, which is a benefits wholesale, largest benefits wholesaler. We do have Crump Life, which I mentioned earlier, which is the largest life insurance wholesaler. And so as I come across these companies, I can like connect them with the right people if there's potential plays there for us. We've always been pretty active in doing POCs with startups and try to kind of stay at the forefront of our of technology through that. I mean, I think one of the things we learned as a company is, and this is where I spent time with Angela, our Chief Digital Officer, thinking about like what are the areas we should be building internally versus what are the things where we should be working with other companies. And that's a topic that's that I think about a lot. Like I can give an example of like as we started building APIs, and originally we were building them ourselves.
Sure.
I realized pretty quickly that like we're not good at it. It created a big queue for the stuff we needed to get done that we weren't going to be able to scale, even though we're like really a big company.
Why aren't you good at it? Like, what does it mean to be good at it?
Well, I think it's just not, technology building is not our core competency. And there's only so much of it that we could do as well, right? Like we're not probably ever going to be in a spot where we have scaled up massively to be doing all the APIs all the time. And so, like, as I was thinking about that space, I realized like this is a much better business for a startup company to be in. Like they can focus on the APIs. Once they get an API built with one carrier, with one broker, it's easier for them to scale that same connection to other players. They're going to be able to raise a ton of money to be specialists in that area, right? Sure. So even though we're a big company, I'm not going to have the budget that a startup might have, ironically, because they're just focused on that vertical, and then they can monetize that vertical. And so I try to think about things that way a little bit of like, okay, this is a spot that a startup is going to be able to do really well. And we should just be early adopters. We should be at the forefront of it. Then we can catch the flywheel and get the benefits of that. Versus, for us an API, we might get a short-term benefit from having a connection before somebody else. For those that don't know what an API is, it's just like my computer talking to your computer through, without a human in the middle, kind of. But everything in insurance is going to APIs. But I realize a startup can scale that much better than we can, and then we can kind of be at the forefront of that. And but then we get the benefit of the flywheel if they catch as well. So like Herald API is an example of that, where we started working with them early, and now they're scaling, and they've got a number of other big companies, I won't mention any of the names, that are working with them. And but as they grow, we're growing with them because they can say we're already connected with CRC, for example.
So you said everything in insurance is going to APIs. What's going to not make that happen?
I think just time. Ultimately, like I think when we started talking about APIs, so like 5 years ago, I'd go into like one of our senior management meetings with a carrier or something. I'd say API, and people would look at me like a dog that heard a funny noise, and tilt their head.
Right.
And then I think we were thinking about API solely for the purposes of like automatic quoting. But in reality, APIs can be used for everything. It could be used for policy issuance. They could be used for just submitting your submission. They could be used, for most of the communication, standardized communication can be done through an API. So that's probably the delineation, I'd say, Adam. Like if it's standardized communications that are being done with a high degree of, replicability, is that a word? I think that's all going to go, submitting, issuing policies, invoicing, like all of that type of stuff is going to, over the next however long it takes to build it, move into like an API structure. Whereas novel communications and things might, probably won't be.
You think you're going to see that on, you think you're going to see that on some of the middle market and the larger business too?
Yeah, it's certainly submit and the handle, all the invoicing, submitting the
Sure.
account, like, and then you can start to layer on in certain areas
Right.
AI data thing. Once you have that information moving in a way that the data can be extracted. So, if you think of like an application going across and, you can pick your product or vertical, once that application is going in some structured way, meaning you can, take data out of the blanks, you could then start layering stuff on top of that API that allows you to, use AI, create underwriting tools to, make sure the submission lands on your underwriter's desk in a way where it's been pre-vetted, and they don't have to look through the application manually, the PDF, and find out that they're in a state that you can't write business in, that kind of thing.
You talked about you've been focused a lot on proof of concepts. Where do you think is the easiest place within your ecosystem, and maybe in particular in the wholesale ecosystem, to be utilizing proof of concepts?
We've done it in, a number of different areas, and we're involved with Broker Tech Ventures, and they always bring in a cadre of companies, and we pick a few each class to do proof of concepts with.
Sure.
We're working pretty heavily on creating efficiencies around data extraction. So we're starting to work with companies on, like we all have this dream of like the appless submission, so like maybe all you need is the name, and then we were able to get enough data from elsewhere to be able to like quote or underwrite an account. So there's some companies that are working around that area that we've been working with.
What's the hardest thing for people to do in that on that topic? What are people finding the biggest where are people finding the biggest hurdle?
Well, I think there's companies that are approaching that space in different ways. So there's and this is around like a company comes in and you want to try to see if there's additional data that you can get on them.
Sure.
So there's some companies like Fenris, Relativity 6, that are bringing in market data and other information to surround those companies. Then there's other companies that are trying to actually connect through API data directly with the buyers, and so and that's kind of a different model where you can integrate with Carta, you can integrate with Carta is a venture capital kind of platform for a very brief description. You can integrate with their finance software and then just in real time have data about the company as it's ongoing, and potentially move into like a no app environment just because you have all of the real time data as it exists. And so in the property world, there's a lot going on there around modeling and there are a lot of space. I can start going on a big tangent here. There's techno. Then you kind of start looking into like even like IoT type things, right? Like where it's not just about the information you get when it comes in, but there's companies like CapScience that are like monitoring what's going on in warehouses so that they can see if there's problems there. Companies in the trucking space that are using data to be their primary source of underwriting versus the application you send in and the loss report.
When you look at the wholesale space, and in particular, you've spent a bunch of time, particularly in the professional liability area, the D&O area. Where have people been? APIs aren't necessarily universally adopted at this point. Where have been the places where you've seen the most success with technology innovations recently?
Well, we're starting to finally see. I tried to make my first portal. Like I realized pretty early on that all the carriers that were making like come to my website and fill out the app yourself and we'll give you an automatic quote, like, and then all the brokers like, yeah, we don't want that. So a long time ago, I had gotten a budget to build like our first portal pre-API. and which is why we stopped it. We realized I was building a portal to nowhere because nobody had APIs yet. And
Right.
so at that time we stopped it. And then since that time, now there's a lot of independent companies that have built more of quote aggregators, right? And we built our own off of like our Ready platform, so we've got industry leading data on our side, and then we've layered that on top of our API connections to carriers that could do automatic quoting. And in that area, we're starting to see pick up finally. So we're starting to see a lot more use of our digital platforms.
It's interesting.
That's been a long and slow time coming. Like people are finally seeing the benefit of it.
It's interesting. The professional liability brokers are not into going onto a carrier website. It might be different on the casualty side. Why do you think that is?
Well, brokers don't have time to go to somebody's website, right? And so that's why the aggregators are starting to work, because there's starting to be enough value there for it. But if you think about the submission, like what all the carriers were competing with before is I've got a PDF application. I can either go to these individual websites and do stuff, or I can just attach it in the email that I'm about to send out. And that's going to take me, like, use the template that I always use. And that's going to take me 3 minutes, and
Sure.
and the whole market's going to have it, and the underwriters can get back to me. Like, it was just, that was better, frankly, than trying to go to individual carriers' websites. So there continues to be an issue around that. Like, and even as the new startups coming in that we're working with and thinking about, like nobody wants to go to another place. So it doesn't necessarily have to mean like full integrations, but is there a co-pilot element? We're thinking about that with AI stuff right now. Brokers aren't going to do anything more than they have to do from like a process standpoint. Like whatever the easiest path is the one they're going to take.
You mentioned AI twice. Is there anyone, or is there anything that you've seen working successfully so far? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we're going to see a few big changes quickly. And then I forget the exact quote and who said it, but there's some quote about like you'll overestimate what it's going to do in the short term, and
Bill Gates, I think.
Underestimate the long term. Yes, Gates. Yeah. And so I think AI is definitely like in that bucket right now, where we're probably estimate under. We do all think about the long term stuff quite a bit, so maybe we aren't underestimating it there. But in the short term, I think there are some areas that we're going to see changes. One that I've seen that's quickly happening is like legal tangential, if you will. So like policy reviews, contract reviews. I think AI is going to eat all of that within the next couple of years. We spend, a lot of other companies spend a bunch of money for like outsourcing for policy checking. So like policies come in and check them. I think AI is going to swallow all that. And there's going to be, right now, there's a lot of money there that's kind of slushing around that the AI companies are targeting. And I think they're going to have success in that space. The time that we as brokers spend doing policy form reviews and things like that, I think that's going to all be AI very soon. So that's a spot that I think is going to happen fast. And then I think the winners are I think everybody's going to wind up having like good legal AI, like that sort of thing. I think the winners are going to relate more to like user interface, service, things like that.
Do you see
that's one side?
Yeah. But you can see. I mean, I agree. You can see all those things happening, and they'll go as fast as potentially the lack of friction in the system from adopters. How are you seeing? Are you seeing movement there, or is it pretty uneven?
Yeah, I mean, it's early days still, right? So people are starting to invest in it and spend money around it, think about it, and like that's an area where we're starting to do POCs as well. And so, but there are like, and there's not like unknown unknowns and things that people might not be thinking about enough, like where is the data held? How is it held? How are you making sure you're not breaching intellectual property issues?
Sure.
Like, is the data in the US or is it out of the US, right? Like there's stuff like that that's pretty important in this space that people have to think a few steps beyond just like how quality the policy review is that got sent out or whatever it is you're looking at. So I think I think there's going to be a lot of adoption on kind of like these single task, like low
Yes.
barrier to entry things. But longer term, I could see the day when AI replaces, kind of like the inside broker type job,
Sure.
the person, and some underwriting jobs in the same regard, potentially, like I'll make more algorithmic underwriting. So the person who really doesn't control clients, isn't a salesperson, and whose responsibility is like sending a thing out, getting the quotes in, aggregating it, comparing them, and sending it back out. That's an area where I think longer term, and who knows how many years, but longer term, I can definitely see like AI swallowing some of that over time. And that's where the fears of AI, right? Like, is it going to make all the jobs go away and that sort of thing, or is it going to allow all of us to do more productive and more interesting things?
Sure.
Because I don't think any of my people love doing policy checking right now, for example. So
Right.
maybe everybody will be happy about that one.
One of the questions I had was, in tech, there's kind of or at least there's been this thought of, hey, Bay Area is kind of the center of the tech innovation. Maybe some of that has gone a little bit away, but I don't know. I mean, are you still seeing that within the insure tech and insurance technology innovations?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm in San Francisco. I don't think we said that earlier. But San Francisco is still by leaps and bounds, and if you look at investment dollars and everything else, like at the forefront of tech innovation, and this is where the startups come. This is where the venture capitalists are predominantly. New York's, I think, New York or Boston. I'm trying to remember the last thing I looked at, and I've never seen actually a breakout of insurtech in this regard that I recall. But just from like venture investment wise, I would say, San Francisco is still the vast majority of the big leader. New York's probably second in insurtech. But it's probably
Does it matter? I mean, so many tech jobs have been kind of made remote.
I don't know that it necessarily matters. From an ecosystem standpoint, it matters a little bit. Like in the early days, as you're a startup,
Right.
you're kind of getting going, just because that network can help you. Like one startup I'm involved with, randomly sent me the resume of a guy that they liked, but they didn't have a spot for. And, the same week, another one of my startups is like, I'm looking for a data guy that looked like that guy,
Right.
like that type of stuff is just from being in the environment that helps make things a bit more efficient. But a lot of companies kind of like keep a foot in San Francisco, and then they go elsewhere. They're and sometimes we like incubate companies here out of our office. We'll give them we'll give them like a little space, and they can kind of start up here as they get going. We've had a number of successful companies that have come out of here.
Awesome. Hey, that's our time. But I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and chat.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always good to chat with you.
Yeah, you too. All right. Thank you all for
All right.
joining. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Bye.